Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, hello and welcome again to the Base to Base Biotech Podcast, and this is number 37, going out on November the 28th, Black Friday in some places. I hope if you're in the US you had a good Thanksgiving. It was always interesting living in Canada, having Thanksgiving in October and trying to explain that to people. But the 2 days before and after the US version always meant no news and no emails. I think the life sciences sector is also one that's free from Black Friday. You can't really have 30% off a clinical trial. Of course, as well as being Black Friday, November the 28th is also Red Planet Day and National Day of Listening, hopefully to this podcast. Last week we had conversations with Iris Earn from Business Region Gothenburg, Robert Bunn, founder and president of Ultrasound AI, and Laura McNeil, CEO of the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Research Foundation. This week our guests are Jérôme Van Biervliet, chair of the board of Flanders Life Sciences body Biovia and managing director at VIB, Sylvain Sachot, partner at Asabys Partners, and Jonas Béal, head of science strategy R&D at Owkin. If you do have news or suggestions for who should be on the podcast, or indeed any other suggestions or comments, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com, which is also the address you can use if you're interested in advertising with us or sponsoring a podcast episode, or even to invite us to an event that you'd like us to cover. First, let's take a look at some of the news you may have missed over at deeptechdigest.com. Customized cells could fight brain cancer. Results from a new trial could lead to shorter TB treatment times, and a breakthrough in cancer immunotherapy has been found using marine bacteria. There are reports of a groundbreaking rapid diagnostic test for prostate cancer. The FDA has approved a combination of drugs for certain patients with bladder cancer, and we had an article on the next era of cell and gene therapy. Enzymatic single-stranded DNA shows potential for non-viral gene editing. There's a $120 million investment to grow talent and innovation in Virginia, and a calcium-sensitive switch boosts cancer drugs' efficacy. A new immune process has been identified that may alleviate Alzheimer's disease. A new understanding of unstable proteins could be the key to new cancer treatments. New AI technology can diagnose dementia patients faster and more accurately. And you can read all of these and plenty more at deeptechdigest.com. Okay, let's get to the interviews. First up, we're talking AI with Jonas Béal, head of science strategy R&D at Owkin. Owkin is a French-based biotech company focused on applying artificial intelligence to clinical research and drug development. And recently, the company said its platform is like ChatGPT for biology. So let's find out how and why. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about the company.
Yeah, sure. So basically, Owkin is building AI for biology to better decipher biology and also make a clinical impact. And this can be showcased, for instance, through our publications. We publish quite a lot, both methodological and also applied papers, sometimes with academic partners in high-impact journals, and also collaborating quite a lot with pharma partners to make the impact, basically, to ensure that we can bring AI to very impactful use cases. And nowadays, we are doing this mostly through agentic AI solutions to apply this to drug discovery and development problems.
All right, so now it's time for acronyms and definitions. Could you let me know what super LLMs are?
That's a good question. So LLM, of course, are large language models. So we are now used to it with all those existing models. But there is a galaxy of different LLMs. The one we are used to are the commercial one from Anthropic, OpenAI, and they are super powerful and super versatile. They can answer a large amount of questions with good enough answers. But in some applications, they miss the target for very expert biological reasoning. So that's why we sometimes need some more specialized models. And we're training some of them to ensure that they can provide accurate answers really at the level we expect and we need for biological reasoning, thinking about the target, thinking about the biological pathways. And those are basically the kind of enhanced LLMs or super LLMs that we'd like to integrate in our products.
And the next definition then, I guess, is could you tell me what KPro is?
Sure. So KPro is basically the agentic AI product that Owkin developed over the past year. It's here basically to ensure that you can enable smarter and data-driven decision-making across the drug portfolio. To do that, it helps you connect with the proper data, including proprietary patient data, and the proper AI models, and then it orchestrates the workflows to ensure that your question can be answered through the access of all those specialized data assets and AI models, and then to give you a very specialized and very specific answer.
All right. And obviously you're doing something right because some of the names that you're associated with. So could you tell me a bit about the partnerships with some of the big companies like Sanofi, AstraZeneca, MSD?
That's the most exciting part for me of the job, because the goal for us is to ensure that those AI models can make a real impact. And in drug discovery and development, this real impact is usually possible through those pharmaceutical giants, as the one you mentioned. So for us, it's a very good opportunity to test and improve the real life impact of our models and solutions for very concrete pharma problems, discussing it with experts in their fields. And the examples of use cases and problems we are tackling together is, for instance, choosing the proper disease and indication for a drug and therefore impacting a clinical trial, or improving the inclusion-exclusion criteria to ensure that the clinical trial is focused on the good subpopulation and good biomarker to have shorter clinical trials, but also increase the probability of success. So AI applications can be super versatile to address some of those questions. But if you want to ensure you're making things right, you need to discuss with the people in the ground dealing with those problems on a daily basis. And that's basically what those pharma giants are. So that's why it's super exciting for me to collaborate with them and really crash test in the battlefield the value of our models.
With respect to the use of those models, is it a case of they do it themselves once they've purchased your model, or do they give you the information and you process it and then give them back the answers?
So basically, if you look a little bit backwards, I would say that in the past, it would have been mostly, since it was so difficult to use those AI models, the working model would have been very service-based. They have the questions, we take the question, apply the model, show the results, they make feedback, and we improve. But nowadays, with LLM and with agentic AI, the goal is to shift a little bit this paradigm. And now they can access directly by themselves the underlying data and AI models in order to accelerate a lot the time to insights and ensure that they can directly have the proper data and models at their fingertips. And as a consequence, be much more autonomous and move from a more service and iterative way of doing things to a more product and much quicker way to get insights. So that's how we are moving things progressively. And that's the ongoing revolution. We're basically experimenting with LLMs and agents.
A lot of pharma companies are developing their own systems and AI platforms. How does KPro fit in with that?
Yeah, that's a very important point, because we need to be humble and we do not pretend we'll replace all of the pharma workflows. It would be totally pretentious. So the goal is to ensure that we can bring some differentiation. There are things that we are doing very well, accessing deep multimodal data, applying some very specific modality extractors to ensure that we can properly analyze this data. So there are different tasks like this that we are doing very well, and they impact quite a lot biomarker questions, population selections, and many questions around translational and early development. So for those ones, the goal is to ensure our agents and solutions can be easily used by pharma clients and pharma partners. But of course, we also need to ensure that the platform is not a closed one. It needs to be open, and it needs to be able to integrate either through APIs or through MCP protocols, who are more and more common with agents. So it's very important to ensure this bidirectional connection. We like to be able to integrate some pharma knowledge and tools in our platform when it makes sense, and vice versa. We want to ensure that the pharma platform can also leverage parts of our solutions or all our solutions in a very customized basis. So I think integration is really the key word. We don't want to replace, but we think we can bring more value. And for that, we need to be smart in the way we integrate our solutions.
And what are some of the limitations with some of the current AI applications in biotech and life sciences?
I feel it's one of the most challenging fields because the validation can take ages. Even if you're super smart today and you hope you're being smart about something, about a new target, it will take years and years to ensure that this drug is going through clinical trial, the clinical trial is validated, and then the ground truth is super long to obtain. So that's why in this field in particular, it's so difficult to have the proper iteration and improvement loop, because the ground truth about what is the real life impact for patients of AI, this is difficult and quite long to obtain. So that's why it's sometimes a bit difficult to assess the real life impact of those AI solutions. So there are proxies for that. We need to ensure about, could we at least help those people to be quicker at generating insights, how we can have intermediate proof points that we are improving the decisions. So those are the challenges we are facing, because of course, we want to ensure there is value and impact, but since it's super long validation timeline, that's something that of course is challenging. And the second challenge, of course, is that biology is, of course, super complex. It's a very nice statement, but it's still true. That's not a field where we know all the underlying laws and mechanisms. There is still so many things to discover and so many complexity, patient heterogeneity, differences between two patients or differences between different cells in a single patient. So it's a multi-scale problem. And AI is quite good at understanding better the biology in some of those scales, at connecting some of those scales, but we do not yet have a fully fleshed multi-scale understanding of biology. So people are moving forward. There are lots of exciting science and stuff on some spots, but we do not yet have a fully connected understanding and simulation of biology, probably because it's a very complex problem, of course. So yeah, there is also, of course, this kind of epistemological problem, and we haven't yet cracked biology completely. So both validation problem and a complexity problem.
I think everybody's heard of, well, more now than they used to. I think it was just ChatGPT, but I think people have heard of Copilot and all of the other ones now. But you've described your platform as ChatGPT for science. Could you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, I think the power of a tool like ChatGPT is to be a wrapper around super complex models, but still provide a user-friendly entry point to those models. So you don't need to understand the full complexity of the model. You can still ask your question in natural language and benefit from those very complex models. And that's why it's a kind of a copilot, because you don't need to understand everything under the hood, but it will still provide some answers. It will still be helpful for you. Similarly, our goal is to ensure that all the smart people who know the exact biological question they'd like to ask, they will be able to ask this question in natural language. And even if they are not the one being able to code, to access the data, to perform the data processing, they need to benefit from those insights. So that's why it's a similar copilot thinking, because nowadays, otherwise, it's impossible to gather all expertise in a single person. Even as a data scientist by background, I cannot be up to date to understand both the molecular data, the imaging data, all the scientific literature, the clinical context. It's impossible for a single person. That's where AI and agentic AI is super helpful to help you gather all those evidence, all those streams in one single engine, with then powering your investigations and helping you in a very interactive mode.
What applications are you anticipating this being useful for, and what advantages will it have there?
So I think one of the main advantage at the very short term will be to accelerate time to insight, because we are putting all the required capabilities in a single place. Again, when you ask a question, the first pain point is, where is the data? How can I connect to the data that I would like to use to answer this question? And the data can already be connected in the platform, including some proprietary data that Owkin generated with academic partners. So that's the first thing. But then all the AI stack that is super important to extract information, this is also something that requires expertise. And again, we are putting that in the same platform to ensure it's accessible at your fingertips, basically. So the main advantage is really to be able to gather all those decision-making prerequisites in a single place. And then the application is to basically help you understand all the key decision points in drug discovery and development. As my target the good biology and the desired biology in non-small cell lung cancer? Or for that given drug, given the target and the mechanism of action, what are the 2 or 3 cancers in which this drug is most likely to succeed? This requires data access. This requires ability to quantify the target expression and all the pathways in the given diseases. So all those questions are typically questions where usually you would have needed lots of iterations, and it might be very long. In healthcare and clinical trial development in general, health timeline is very important. So if you can shorten these decision-making timelines, then you're making a big impact.
Are other companies doing similar things to this? It kind of begs the question, why haven't other companies developed something like this?
I think there are, of course, different companies trying different recipes. What I mentioned is, of course, a very generic problem. And I think it's super exciting to see that different companies are trying to do this, but each one with different strengths and recipes. Owkin recipes is basically to have what we call a reverse translational paradigm. It's really to start from patient data. You can also address similar problems starting from cell lines or animal models, and it also provides an information that is quite complementary. But the way we are doing that was quite opinionated. Of course, there are other opinions and other ways to do that, but I think it's very important to have several companies trying different recipes at the best of the capabilities, and then ensure some kind of integration, as we mentioned before, because I don't think at the end of the day, there is one single good recipe. We'll probably need to benefit from several. So I think we have some good differentiations in terms of access to data, ability to extract information directly from patient data, and our past expertise in AI applied in the pharma workflows, because we've already done some target identification, population selection, biomarker discovery with pharma partners. So we have good expertise about how to orchestrate all these data and AI tools in order to answer those specific questions. So we have good ingredients, and we're trying to cook the best recipe out of that.
All right, another acronym, if you could explain it for me, is BASI, which is Biological Artificial Superintelligence.
We are aware that today, artificial intelligence in general hasn't yet cracked biology. We know that we need to go one step beyond, and the current artificial intelligence hasn't yet cured cancer, of course, otherwise we would know it. So we know we need to reach another stage for what can be called, for instance, artificial superintelligence. And in our case, what we're interested in is the biological artificial superintelligence. Of course, there are many other problems that need to be tackled by AI, but these emphasize the fact that we need to upgrade the ability to understand biology in a holistic way, and then to really power a new range, a new set of discoveries. We still need to upgrade by one order of magnitude the performance of those models, and this biological artificial superintelligence can be seen as the target. That's where we like to go, and that's, I hope, that what we manage to reach at some point.
I guess in part that's difficult when you look through all of the scientific literature and we're still discovering things. So it's one of those things where there's so much to biology that it's quite a difficult thing to get to the next level, I imagine.
Yeah, totally. I think we are trying to build internally some of the pieces that we feel are missing. For instance, a more specialized LLM to improve biological reasoning. We feel that that's a gap and missing a piece to build the overall building. But of course, there are many other pieces of the puzzle, basically, to build the overall picture. We're building some of them. Other companies, for instance, are improving quite a lot the way to design chemical structures to make drug from that. So that's, of course, all these AlphaFold kind of models. So that's another piece, for instance, is very important, not the one that we're developing by ourselves. But that's an example of the different angles and companies. And at the end of the day, we'll probably need several of them to succeed in order to reach the stage that will allow us to really improve drug discovery and development.
For a lot of people, or some people, the introduction of AI into biology is being seen as a little bit of hype, because we're seeing a lot of companies moving into this space and it's become almost a buzzword. How do you transform that hype into hope for the future, I guess?
I think the most important recipe to transform hype in hope is to be very grounded in the environment and to interact a lot with pharma partners, but also with academic centers. If you're doing your AI alone in a silo, there is a very high risk to build irrelevant models. That's why most of our activities is always in collaboration, either with top academic centers or with pharma partners, because they are the one who are basically working on that on a daily basis that will provide impact by treating patients, by developing new drugs. So collaborating with them, we ensure that at least we are developing AI in a direction that makes sense for them. So we cannot just publish a pure methodological paper. It's important to push the boundaries. But if you're doing that alone, then there is a high risk of just building hype, indeed. And if you're ensure you're always collaborating with all the ecosystem, again, both healthcare providers, top academic centers, researchers, pharma partners, then you ensure that what you're building is really oriented towards real life problem. And that's where you can build hope.
And obviously AI continues to evolve, but the other thing on the horizon seems to be quantum computing. Is that going to influence this?
That's a very good question. I wouldn't pretend I'm expert enough in that to make a very comprehensive answer. Of course, there are many different dimensions in terms of even LLM development, scaling laws, how we can still improve the validation of those models if we increase the number of data, or if we improve the underlying computing problems, as you mentioned. So those problems are indeed the one that might potentially change the field, not necessarily for the next 6 months, but that's probably what would impact us in the next years at least. So that's something we need to monitor. But again, since those fields required such deep and specific expertise, I hope that those companies working on that will progressively move that forward. And as soon as it will become tractable and that we'll be able to connect with our use case, then we'll probably benefit from the ability to improve computing, accelerate some workflows, and so on and so forth.
We've talked about the technology itself, but it relies on data. And will the availability of data and who controls data be a limiting factor and impact on smaller biotechs?
Yeah, that's a critical point. Indeed, in healthcare, data is quite large, but it's sometimes very difficult to access because it's sensitive data, and it's normal. So it's very personal data, genomic data about your diseases. So that's not easy to access this data. That's why it's super important to have relationship with all the academic centers and to build trust with them. And to build trust, of course, you need to collaborate, to be quite transparent about your solutions, to publish them, to also ensure that the community can better understand them. So that's very important. Owkin pioneered some federated access to data, which means that basically the data, the hospitals and academic centers need to own their data, have visibility on that, but still we are putting in place solutions to ensure that we can work on this data while ensuring that they retain control on that, which is super important to build trust. So that's one way, among others, to access more data while building a trustful environment with all our academic partners. So that's something Owkin is doing quite a lot. And then it helps scaling this data access for companies that might not be able to access this data by themselves. Some very big pharma, of course, have already one-on-one partnership with big academic centers, of course. But sometimes if you need to access data in 4 or 5 centers, and especially if you're a smaller company, it might indeed be difficult to set up that by yourself. So that's why having fully dedicated team, as it's the case at Owkin, to build partnership, build the IT infrastructure to smooth this data access, this has great value and can indeed improve and facilitate how we bring this value to a large amount of players.
There seems to be a lot of interest lately in the environmental cost of AI and computing and even quantum once that arrives. Are there major issues around that?
That's, of course, something we need to monitor for several reasons. First of all, the more we use some compute power, the worse it is for environmental questions. But even for us, in terms of cost, it's not a good thing. So we are always incentivized to ensure we can be as efficient as possible, as energy efficient as possible. So that's something that needs to drive our development, both for environmental questions, but also for pure efficiency and cost questions. So I think in this regard, there is some good alignment of the incentives. And some of the options, for instance, is to ensure that the user, when interacting with our solutions, is not reinventing the wheel each time. It means, for instance, we need to pre-compute things, to sometimes process data and ensure that the easiest queries can be addressed with something that has been computed once for all, or that is not necessarily computed each time, because otherwise it's a shame to reuse super powerful and demanding models for the simplest query or for the most frequent query. So that's where also we need to think about how to ensure that the simple queries can be addressed with the simplest tool, while restricting the access to the most complex and demanding workflows when it's really relevant. So that's something we are thinking at quite a lot, because it's very important to ensure our tool can answer quickly with a proper level of depth, and as a consequence, be also much more efficient from a compute and environmental perspective.
So where do you see this field of AI and integration with life sciences and biotech in the next 5 years? And associated with that, where do you see your company?
I feel that today a 5-year prediction is almost impossible without being a prophet. When you see how fast it's moving, honestly, it would have been difficult to predict current situation even 1 year ago. So being humble, I would say that a few years from now, I don't know if it's 5 years, I guess the integration of those AI tools and drug discovery and development workflows will not be an option. It will be, of course, by design. I think also the regulation environment will have evolved. There are lots of interesting discussions at the moment, even with the FDA, with the EMA. They want to enforce and improve the way those tools are also included in the workflows, which is super exciting for me, because it means that the whole field is now endorsing those tools and empowering those tools in real life problems in the daily routine. So I feel a few years from now, that will be around about lots of tools integrated, interconnected also, because I again think that there will be many players that will need to interact with good interoperability of solutions. And many of those tools will still need to improve from some very specific workflows, but I think we'll clearly have something more stabilized and much more integrated between third parties, between AI companies, pharma companies. I think we'll need to integrate that much more, but I don't even think it will take 5 years. I would say that in 2-3 years from now, I guess it will already be a completely different ecosystem.
Maybe the question should have been 5 weeks instead of 5 years.
Maybe 5 months.
5 months.
But beyond, it's indeed difficult.
So much going on in the field of AI right now with drug discovery and all the benefits it can bring. So nice to get an overview there. Next, we're headed back to the gift that keeps on giving, and that is NLS Days in Gothenburg. It was really interesting to chat with not only lots of companies, but also representatives from regions and countries. I was particularly interested in chatting to the delegation from the Belgian region of Flanders to find out about the life sciences sector there. And who better to get the information from than Jérôme Van Biervliet, chair of the board of Flanders life sciences body Biovia and managing director at VIB, which is a research institute founded by the Flemish government in 1995. VIB's goal is to strengthen Flemish life sciences research and to turn the results into economic growth. All right, so I guess maybe then first if we could start with a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so very nice to be here. I'm Jérôme Van Biervliet. I'm the managing director of VIB. We are an academic research institute, on the one hand focusing on top science, but also, and in this context more relevant, very much a driver to the biotech ecosystem in Flanders, the northern part of Belgium. I'm also the chairman of the board of Biovia, which is the cluster organization of biotech and medtech and agrotech companies in the region. So I feel like we have a good connection to our ecosystem, and we're still building that.
Right. And what kind of a system is there in that region at the moment?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of dynamic, because we've been building this ecosystem over the last 30 years, really based on, first of all, globally leading science. You really need worldwide leading science in order to attract attention of investors. That's the first part. But second, it really takes a lot of nurturing and to bring disruptive science into spin-offs that are successful. And to give you an example, We've raised 42 spin-offs so far, which cumulatively have raised over 2 billion euros in venture capital equity money. So significant stories, like, for example, you may know Ablinks, which was a large story. But we go beyond that. We also foster the ecosystem. Not all innovations come from our institute. We also attract companies when they're still small and make them grow. And so, for example, Argenix, one of the leading biotech companies in Europe at the moment, has really grown out of our ecosystem and has now become a profitable company. And we believe we have a large pipeline of possible contenders to that same position. And so, yeah, that's really where you start seeing economies of scale, where you see talent coming to the region, and especially also investment capital being deployed in the region. And I think that's where things come together. Things have to come together in order to make the whole. So that's a bit how it has grown.
Right. And do you have to make regional connections and partnerships?
Yes, of course, we do collaborate a lot with a number of regions. First of all, of course, the Benelux is very close. There's a lot of ties there. But also, for example, here today at the Nordic Life Science Days, there's more and more connections also with the Nordic area, either historically with Sweden, but especially recently also with Denmark. We have 2 startup companies that are both based in Belgium as well as in Denmark, based on joint spin-outs or joint programs. So there is really also a lot of capital connections. So venture capitals funds, of course, look all over Europe, and there's many mutual investments in our portfolio of companies by Nordic investors and vice versa. And so I think there's really a cultural fit there as well. Really sort of no nonsense and getting down to business and making sure that it's really all about driving for the assets that these companies are developing. And so I think actually going forward, because I'm also an advisor to the European Commission, we were one of the drivers to install this Biotech Act, which is coming, and really reinforcing the message that we should look beyond the borders of specific member states. This is a European effort, in terms of the capital markets, in terms of regulatory efforts, we really need to look across member states and form a coalition of willing member states to achieve some of the key things that we need in order to further accelerate the ecosystem.
I think within Europe, a lot of people think about that Swiss cluster and maybe in the UK. Is there much awareness of what you're doing within Europe?
Certainly within the investor community for sure, and the business community is starting more and more, absolutely. I think in the broader community, let's say, we're still a bit under punching perhaps where we should be, although I really do like the motto, which is a bit ingrained in our in the way we do business, is under promise and over deliver. I think the UK is obviously very prominent, but they've also had a huge marketing machine behind it, I would say, and nice branding. But okay, Argenix again is the nice example. They grew from a 3-person spin out, or 3 people out of Ablinks, one of the VIB startups. We were one of the very early shareholders in Argenix. We're able to help them get started, and look where they are now, right? So they've become a Euro Stoxx 50 company. They are valued at a 40 billion euro valuation. And so I think these success stories really show the way. There are more stories like that, and especially growing unicorns like Orionis or Comfo or other companies that really will make this type of story possible. And I think that's where people start to notice, right? Because it's these leading companies that really sort of attract the attention, and then people start looking, now this wasn't on my radar screen, perhaps where these companies grew, but actually, so that's where I think under premise and over deliver is still a good motto to hold to.
Regions like Belgium and even the Netherlands are probably more attractive for companies moving into other regions.
Yeah, I think it's there's an element to that, although, in the end, it's always about the quality of the science, the quality of the data that you have to offer. And I hear from many investors, because we are very well connected to the investor landscape, that actually the quality of the science in Europe often outperforms what is offered to investors in the US. The story behind it may not be quite as high flying perhaps, and so many expensive words used. But actually, if you look into in due diligence, then they actually find that it's much better validated very often than what is the case on the other side of the pond. And then indeed, I think the UK in particular, I think would do well, especially in these current geopolitical times, to actually look a bit in their backyard. I was one of the debaters with them in the recent grand rounds in Cambridge, together with Steve Bates, and actually mentioned to him, I think it's, the UK is obviously very proud of their preferred relationship, but I think they're looking the wrong way. They should look the other way, across the other ocean, and look for synergies there, because there's a lot of synergies possible, especially in this early startup creation landscape, where it's already very difficult as it is. But if we can combine the good science there is into better, more compelling investment cases, then I think we'll all benefit from that. So
definitely, but I think even within Belgium, there's a lot of good science, there's good universities,
yes.
There's a ready workforce for a company to say, well, we could base ourselves in Belgium.
Absolutely, and I'll give you a good example. J&J was part of their partnership with Legend on their launch for Carvykti, one of their cell therapy-based cell therapies, was really looking for a European hub all across Europe as they do it, really comparing all the ecosystems one to the other. And they specifically chose, thanks to also the presence of VIB, a location right next to our headquarters building, because of exactly what you mentioned. It's the area where the investment climate, where the talent is available. And obviously now they're on a very steep ramp up. That's a 400 million euro investment, so it's a significant investment for the region. And like I said, it just goes to show that the potential is really there, indeed, because of the the flow of talent and workforce, and that is certainly a part of our ecosystem.
And as far as NLS days, what brings you here?
Well, first of all, I have a keynote in a minute, so
sorry.
we'll be talking about. No, that's okay. It's a little bit later.
Right.
But then, for sure, obviously making connections at events like this is very important. My team goes to a lot of these events. Like I said, I think there's a lot of a natural fit almost between the Nordic life sciences ecosystem and the Benelux one, although I still wish that we could build more natural connections. I think that's where we each need to elevate above, let's say, our each little member state and talk about the European ambition, which I was very happy to see very much part of, for example, the Draghi report on European competitiveness, that biotech should really be playing there. So I think that's why I'm here.
Clearly a lot going on in the Flanders region of Belgium. The northern part of the country isn't a place I've really visited a lot, although I've been to Bruges a few times thanks to the ferry that went from my hometown of Hull across to Flanders every night. Sadly, that stopped at the end of 2020. I think I need to go back and explore a little more and maybe do some more life science interviews there. For the third interview this week, we're talking about the recent news of Barcelona-based venture capital company Asabys Partners, which recently integrated Aliath Bioventures into its platform, boosting assets under management to more than 400 million euros. To tell us about what that means and about the Spanish life sciences sector, we had a conversation with Asabys Partners' Sylvain Sachot. Maybe you could start by telling me a little bit about the company.
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for having me. So I'm a partner at Asabys Partners. We are a venture capital firm based in Barcelona. Most of the team is based here in town in Barcelona, but we have a few people based in Madrid in particular, founded in 2018. Right now with 400 million euros under management, a team of 17 people and 22 portfolio companies. Started in 2018 with a first fund of 120 million euros. This one is completely invested. We invested in a dozen of portfolio companies from 2019 to 2022. Starting 2023, we started investing from Fund 2 at 180 million euros, and now we are also counting with the fund coming from the Asabys partnership that we just announced very recently. So relatively new story, Asabys, but we come from a larger history of venture capital. Most of the team was involved in different structures doing venture capital in healthcare over the past 10, 15, 18 years.
All right. You just mentioned Asabys. Could you tell me a little bit about the integration of that into the company?
Yeah. So the idea here with Asabys is was really to incorporate a team of 5 talented individuals that we knew from the local Spanish and Barcelonian ecosystem. People with whom we've invested in the past in several companies. Ona Therapeutics, we were with them in Gradient, and we were with them in Deeppool. There was a good chemistry between people, and we started thinking about that opportunity when thinking about our plans for the future, when starting to plan for the next 5 years and what we wanted to do and who we wanted to be after a few years. And it became clear that human capital was going to be important to meet our expectations. And so it became clear that incorporating this team of 5 people was actually better for everybody than continuing as separated entities. And so we decided to go that way and to plan for our organic growth of the future.
Right. There seems to be a bit of a trend towards consolidation. Is that part of a wider European pattern, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're referring to the EQT and LSP stories and Apollo, Sofinova, and others, Eurazeo and Coma, for instance. I think in that case, we're speaking about large asset managers, private equity firms acquiring stakes or acquiring the complete entities in venture capital. I think the case for a PE team, for a PE firm, is to gain exposure in venture capital and in healthcare. And to gain expertise where they don't have. Private equity and venture capital are 2 different businesses with different talents, different expertise. And so for those private equity firms to gain expertise, you have 2 ways of doing that, organically or inorganically. And so the Eurazeo story with Coma or the EQT with LSP, the idea was to get there inorganically and gain quick exposure into a dynamic and possibly lucrative segments. We have, by the way, a partnership in that sense with a firm in Madrid called Alantra. That's a 17 billion asset management and advisory firm. We've been in a partnership with Alantra for the last 6+ years, and so we are familiar with that type of partnerships too. I think to the question of why doing that, I think it's a win-win situation for everybody actually in the ecosystem. If you think for PE, as I was mentioning, it's interesting to gain exposure to a new segment. It's also good for venture capital firms to scale, to raise bigger, to have access to different LPs, to have access to a different Rolodex, to have, just to scale and get bigger funds. It's also interesting for, I think, portfolio companies to have access to those funds locally in Europe that will not only invest early stage, but also follow on and invest later stage when companies scale up. Important to have access to anchor investors locally when time comes to finance phase 2B, phase 3, for instance, in clinical trials in biotech. And I think overall, frankly, it's also interesting for the ecosystem in general. It's also a sign of evolution of an ecosystem, from an ecosystem of small VC firms doing a lot of seeds to an ecosystem also financing scale and bigger groups with capacity to grow the seeds. I think that's a win-win for everybody all around. In the case of the Asabys partnership, it's a little bit different. I was mentioning we were planning our growth and not that we were looking for expertise in a field where we were lacking experience. We have been active in the field of venture capital and healthcare for the past decade or plus. So we were really planning our growth. It's Not that we're planning to grow outside of what we are doing currently. It's more that we're planning organically. How do we get organized to meet our objectives? That's a bit of a different story, but I think it's true. The consolidation in the venture capital industry and the scale of the venture capital industry in Europe is in movement. It's changing, and it's a very nice thing to see.
Your own company, where are you currently investing geographically, and do you expect that after the integration that's going to change any?
No, we're expecting we will continue working as we have operated in the past. We have currently Asabys Fund 2 is active, and we are in investment period, so we're looking for investments in that sense. So that's an Asabys fund. That's not an Alliath fund. So right now we have sort of the Alliath fund is operated independently, also with a team from now Asabys, but the funds are operated by different teams, and that's actually important for us. To manage conflict of interest and to manage things properly. So different funds operated differently by different teams, but then the new funds that will come in the future will be managed by the common Alliath and Asabys, and now entirely Asabys team.
Where do you invest? Is it primarily Spain or is it across Europe?
So we invest in Europe. We do have a sensitivity when it comes to invest in Spain. Obviously, that's our ecosystem. We know our ecosystem locally here in Barcelona, but also in the rest of the country. We know there is deal flow. So we do have this willingness, frankly, to invest locally, but we do also invest outside of Spain, mainly within Europe. We do have some portfolio companies in the US, but it's more of a natural evolution of our portfolio companies right now than a choice from our side to invest in North America.
Could you maybe walk me through a little bit of the life science scene in Spain at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a nice moment, and it's a nice ecosystem that we've created here or that was created here in Spain over the last 20 years. I think I was not here yet, but when I'm thinking about what's been going on over the last 20 to 25 years in Spain, there was first a political willingness to create an academic ecosystem first. And so there was a lot of infrastructure that was created since the early 2000s, particularly in Barcelona, but also in Madrid and in the rest of the country, in the Basque Country, in different cities in Spain. A lot of infrastructure, a lot of high quality infrastructure that was created in the beginning of during the years 2000, created, attracted talents that was financed and that discovered things since 2005, 2010, discoveries that are now financed by venture capital. So we've seen a growing startup and venture capital ecosystem in Spain, in particular in Barcelona. And I think maybe the reason why the ecosystem in Spain is centralized in Barcelona is maybe because a lot of the groups in venture capital are based in Barcelona, but also because a lot of academic researchers are based in Barcelona. But there are success stories also outside of the city, and in the Basque Country in particular, and in Madrid, we've seen some cool things happening. So now we're in a situation where we are actually on the map of the world map of biotech and life sciences venture and startups in the world, and it's interesting to see that even when I'm in the US and I'm speaking with people, like people is asking me, what's going on in Barcelona? I'm hearing about Barcelona. What's going on there? And I think the story is just that there is this willingness of making things happen, and we see good quality science. We see nice stories, nice startups doing honestly very good science and taking risks actually, and being frontline. And we have now a growing list of international investors investing in Spain, investing in Barcelona, in biotech, but also in medtech. It's not just a biotech thing. It's we're seeing the whole ecosystem growing, and now we're seeing also acquisitions. We're seeing some big rounds being raised, and so we're seeing a maturing ecosystem. This is happening, and that's a nice thing to see firsthand.
Is it all based within Barcelona, or is there capacity to kind of move that out into regional parts of Catalonia, like, Sabadell, and is it kind of all in one spot?
The infrastructure is in Barcelona. So if you're thinking about, wet lab space, dry lab space, if you're thinking about where would those companies set up, where can they go? I mean, it's around Barcelona. In the outside of Barcelona, we do actually have a portfolio company in close to Sabadell. It's called Anaconda Biomed. So it can happen there, but it can also happen in other parts of the country. I mean, it's not just about Barcelona. It can be Tarragona, it can be Girona, it can be and outside of Catalonia, Madrid, the Basque Country, Galicia. We have some success stories in Galicia, by the way. It can be in any part of the country. But it's true that there is a focus within Catalonia and within Barcelona. There is a concentration of startups in Barcelona. But I think this is also something that will evolve because we see nice opportunities in other parts of the country. So it's a matter of time before we start also spreading the money around in the entire Spanish ecosystem.
What kind of companies do you invest in as a company?
So we invest exclusively in healthcare, but within healthcare, we're agonists. So we do biotech, biopharma, we do medtech, we do digital health, we do diagnostics. We really try very hard to be agnostics in terms of industry, within industry, any modalities. If I'm thinking biotech, we've done gene therapy, we've done advanced biologics, we've done small molecules. We try to be as open as possible because we do believe that opportunities can come from anywhere. If there is a medical need, if there is a business case, and if there is an appetite from the industry in a particular indication, there will be a case for us to invest. And so we really try to look at opportunities in an objective way in terms of how can this solve a medical need. Is there a real need, by the way? And if so, we have an interest in supporting these stories. So yeah, agonist within the field of healthcare.
And how do you decide what companies to invest in?
There needs to be a case, a scientific case. Most of us are scientists, by the way. So we need to be excited by what we see. There needs to be a high quality science. There needs to be a medical case, but not only it's also about a business case. Can we make a living out of it? Is it too competitive? Is there still room for a new player in that segment? And there needs to be finally an investment case. Will anybody be interested in acquiring a company like this one if we were to prove the claims that this treatment or this technology is to work in this particular set of patients? So scientific, business, and investment case, but I would add maybe what we're looking for really now is talent also. And we like to back people with a track record and with experience in delivering their claims. So not that we don't back first-time CEOs and first-time teams, but we also have a particular interest in backing people that will deliver, possibly in time and within budget. But this is something we really try really hard to assess before investing.
Is your involvement limited to simply funding? You just say, okay, here's some money, off you go, or do you work with the companies and get involved in the boards, that kind of thing?
No, we're involved in boards. We're actually always two people. We try to be two people involved within each portfolio company. So one board member and typically one observer. We really also try to be here, present, not just at board meetings, but how it works. You have board meetings and different between boards, different meetings, and we really try to be here to help and to make the stories a success.
Could you tell me some of the existing companies that you're if you're able to, some of the companies that you're working with and some of the success stories that you've had?
Yeah, so if I'm thinking Fund 1, we have a few companies that are Spanish companies, most of them, or that started as Spanish companies that are right now success stories for us. So the first one would be a company called Origo, and I was telling you about Galicia, northwestern part of the country. So Origo, which we financed, that was I think in 2020, we entered into this company as a solo institutional investor with a local bank in Galicia. So we entered there and got acquired a year to a year and a half after our first investment, when we were actually still very young in the cap table. This company was working on a target. It's called AKT5. It's a TGF beta cofactor. It's involved in fibrosis. And so we were working on the compound to target AKT5, got acquired by a company called Agomab in a cash deal. So that was a pure acquisition. And we decided as investor, as Asabys Partners, we decided to invest into companies that was acquiring us, actually. So we're now part of the cap table at Agomab. The reason being that we really liked what we were seeing in this company, good science, good potential, and we really wanted to follow on our investment. So we decided to invest in this company. That company is now based in Belgium, and it's a company that's clinical stage. They have 2 clinical trials ongoing, one in Crohn's disease and the other one in IPF, both targeting fibrosis. And we are, by the way, expecting the data in short. And so we're all holding our breath to see how it goes. But this is a company that has raised several hundreds of millions of euros. So that's a very, very big company right now. A company that has attracted the interest of very, very big investors. And knowing that the science started in Spain and started with Asabys and other investors from Galicia. So that's for us a very nice success story. The other one would be Splice Bio. So Splice Bio, gene therapy, started in 2020. And I think we literally signed the first seed round. That was a very small seed round that we signed with Isios Capital here in Barcelona. Very small seed round that was signed during COVID, during the lockdown, the toughest lockdown we had during COVID. So we did the diligence and signed this Series seed during that time. A year and a half later, Series A was closed of 50+ million euros with, I think, Novartis, UCB, there was Gilde with us, NEA, big groups. And this year, the goal of that 50+ million was to advance the pipeline, and in particular, a first program in gene therapy for Stargardt disease. That's an ocular condition, a retinal degeneration. That was the first target of this company. And this year, we closed 120 million Series B with, again, some new investors, EQT, Sanofi Ventures, Ross Venture Fund, and historical investors also, and Asabys also participating in this financing. And now the idea is to finance the first 2 clinical trials of this company. So you see like a first seed proving the concept of this technology, Series A to scale a little bit, and a Series B to prove the concept of that technology in the clinic. So that's also another story for us, from very, very early stage to later stage clinical and clinical positioning of this product. I could go on and on. Maybe in medtech we have this story, and also a Spanish, very local from Barcelona medtech company called InBrain that we created out of a research center called ICN2 here in Barcelona, using graphene, this new material, the graphene, to do brain-computer interface, neuromodulation. So they have several programs ongoing, one of them for Parkinson's and other dementias. And they have a program for the vagal nerve stimulation, also in a partnership with Merck. Early stage company, but still now with some clinical evidence that we literally raised the Series A with Alaya. So that was one of the stories we did with them, and now raised the Series B of 40 million with some international investors, and in particular IMEC Expand from Belgium. So another story of very, very disruptive science that we're pushing towards the market.
Yeah, you just mentioned InBrain and disruptive science. What do you learn from investing in that kind of cutting edge company? And Seyfield will be another one. How does that affect your strategies moving forward?
Yeah, Seyfield is, I think, the last. No, we announced one yesterday, but Seyfield is one of the last. We announced, what we've learned over the years, not just about one investment in particular. It's about all what we've done in the past. I think a few learnings on our side. I think it's very, very important to finance companies appropriately, not to do like small rounds and like go from milestone to milestone and refinance. Our DNA, and I think we were right at doing that from the beginning, was to always try to syndicate companies, to finance them and syndicate with, external investors properly. The reason we really wanted to do that at first was really to have our management teams executing and delivering on their milestones and like developing their technologies and creating value. I think something else that's not that we were overlooking it, but now knowing the current environment, it's tough out there these days. Knowing that it can become complicated when a company needs to just iterate, and maybe they need some more time and they need some more budget to deliver on their milestones. Sometimes you need to be able to have that bandwidth, to have that flexibility, to let them maybe not restart, but like iterate. They maybe just need 6 more months. And so you need to be well financed. And if you go too short, then you are if you go too short and if you go alone, you can be in that situation where the whole refinancing is on you. And so that's not a good situation to be with. So I think the first learning over the years is this one. Properly finance and properly syndicate your company so that you can face refinancing needs. I think the other one, and something also that we've done in the past, and I know some groups don't like to have corporate venture in the cap table. We do have corporate venture groups in the cap table. The reason being that they, beside money and beside the validation of having a corporate telling you, we like what we see, possibly that could be a target for acquisition. But beside that, they also provide operational assistance. So they're here, they help, they provide feedback, professional feedback. For us, it's also something I wouldn't say pushed for, but it's something that we see positively, to have corporates within that will be here and helping at creating value in these companies.
I guess you have a new fund planned for 2026. Could you tell me a bit about that?
So I was telling you, we are right now investing from our fund 2 at 180 million euros. With this fund, we already have 9 companies in portfolio. So we're not done, but we're more than halfway through. So that's a work in progress, but we're advancing well. What we're doing from that fund is not just early stage investing, we're also doing later stage. Safil is one of those actually for us. It's a clinical stage company, pivotal stage company. We started early in 2018 doing a lot of early stage. Now with Fund 2, we still do early stage, but we're transitioning towards a slightly later stage. What we're planning to do right now is to raise an early stage fund for Spanish investments only. So doing company creation out of Spanish research centers and university. Target is 80 to 100 million euros. And we are expecting to close this one beginning to mid next year.
A lot of good growth going on there.
Yeah.
How do you see the company in 5 years' time or whatever?
Coming back to what we were discussing before about the integration of Alliaf and the need for us to have more people. Well, the need to have more people comes from our willingness to raise more funds. There is a tech transfer fund incubating and hopefully up and running next year. But we have more ideas. And the idea would be to cover the whole spectrum of investment within healthcare, from early stage to later stage, from company creation to growth and scale up. And so the way we see, and I'm knocking wood here, but the way we see Asabys in 5 years is a company doing having different silos, to do company creation on one side, to do venture, what we would call like pure venture, Series A, B, C on the other side, and then taking those companies and maybe bringing them to profitability on the other side. So raising more funds, hopefully getting close to $1 billion in AUM. We're at 400 million today, doubling that, slightly more than doubling that in the coming 5 to 7 years, and covering the whole spectrum of investment within life sciences.
We've been all over Europe today, France and then Flanders and now Spain. Certainly good for the life sciences companies there as Asabys continues to invest in the sector. It's another country with biotech hubs, but also plenty of representation around the entire country. So that's it for this week's podcast. If you do want to get in touch with guest opportunities or if you want to advertise, please feel free to contact us at jim@deeptechdigest.com. And just another quick reminder that we do not charge to be on the podcast. So until next time, wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Base to Base Biotech podcast. The Base to Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.